This is Orbital's Pathfinder modular gaming mouse, and it may very well be the only mouse I'll ever need to own. When I tried an early test unit a while back, I felt like I had held more mouse shapes in those first 30 minutes than I had in my entire life so far, and I own a lot of mice. That experience and information alone would be invaluable to someone like me, even if the mouse wasn't instantly breaking my Kovacs PRs, which it did. What I have here is a pre-production review unit, so it's 3D printed rather than molded. The Pathfinder starts out with this bare core that you build out from. It will weigh somewhere between 53 and 58 grams depending on your setup and can be used both wirelessly or wired. In the box, you have left and right side shapes, spaces for them to change their width, different length side buttons, a range of humps, and spaces for those too. You simply take the piece you want and clip it in. Removing them is pretty easy too. I usually just pinch it and it pops out. Let me show you my current setup and the reasoning behind it, and then I'll cover the other unique pieces in the box and what they can do. Each piece has a letter associated with it, so for the left side I'm currently using P for pinch with no spacer. On the right I have C for claw but with the smaller spacer, and for the hump I'm using R for right hand hump with a large spacer. And this feels amazing. It suits my grip style and hand size really well. My final version of the setup I use has my clawmates on the right side, but I'll get into what that's doing a bit later when I go over these interesting fellas. In my opinion and experience, I have found claw style grips to provide the most control and aiming potential. Ideally, that means having your fingertips pointing somewhat into the shell so you can better manipulate the mouse, and having your thumb knuckle and pinky and or ring finger knuckle gripping the back of the mouse to secure it in your hand. The trickiest part of this is the thumb knuckle contact. On all of my mice, I have one or more layers of mounting tape attached to the side, so my knuckle can more easily make contact. If you have to really squeeze it in, that feels uncomfortable and makes aiming more difficult. Thin mice and big hands in particular struggle more with this. While this mouse can do a lot of really cool things, I think my favorite part is actually the right hand hump. I talked to the guys at Orbital about my thoughts on claw grip and the importance of this thumb contact, and they made this shape to address the problem. The asymmetrical design reaches out toward your thumb, and the steep face makes gripping into it quite easy. I think this one piece will make claw grip so much more accessible to people who have struggled using it in the past, and it's probably the kind of thing that when you try it, claw grip suddenly clicks for you and finally makes sense. By using the wide spacer on the hump, I am elongating the mouse. My hands are fairly large at 20.5 by 10.5 centimeters, so this helps to put my fingertips in a more comfortable position and changes where the rest of my fingers sit on the sides. For example, with no spacer, my thumb now grips into the flat top end of this piece and skips the feature altogether. And speaking of this feature, the left side pinch starts out flat and gets a fair bit thicker toward the back and a little thicker toward the top. With my claw grip, and by the way, using claw grip doesn't mean you have to use the designated claw pieces, the thumb is gripping the mouse and applying pressure in this direction to help control the mouse and seat it securely in my hand. This gradient gives me a more direct surface to grip into, reducing fatigue and increasing how much my thumb can contribute to manipulating the mouse. The slight thickening toward the top also makes gripping the mouse much easier. It's as if the mouse is resting on top of your thumb, unlike the opposite where it would just fall away. The right side claw does much the same thing, just more dramatically. The thumb is already well positioned to grip into a mouse. The pinky and ring finger, not so much. If you squeeze your hand in, you will notice that your pinky sits out further than your ring finger. Yet on many modern mice with straight or mostly straight sides, they have to sit in line, and at least for me, squeezing the pinky in does not feel good. This tapered shape lets your pinky sit out a bit wider, and both fingers can grip into the mouse rather than feeling like they're sliding along or squeezing into straight sides. I'm currently using the small spacer here as it helps to extend my pinky and ring finger slightly so they have a bit more room to move around. Without it, they feel a little too scrunched up. I found that having no spacer on the thumb lets my thumb contribute more to my aiming. With a wider spacer, or both, it actually feels quite comfortable, but I lose a lot of my dexterity. Okay, so that's my setup. It would be called PCR-012. That's left, right, hump, so pinch, claw, right hand hump. And then the spaces for left, right hump, so none, 0, the small spacer, 1, and the thick spacer, 2. As for the other pieces in the box, for the humps we have low, medium, and high. For the left side grips we have claw, which has a steep taper toward the bottom and front, kind of like the side of a G303. You probably want to use the longer side buttons to reach over this one. Latch is similar to the pinch, but featuring more of a groove. It's quite comfortable, but I feel like I lose some control when my fingertip is cradled and too well supported. And we have average, which is pretty much your standard straight side. For the right side, we also have average, so a safe, mostly straight side. Pinch, which is also pretty safe with slightly more tapered to it. Right hand, which mimics the curve of ergo shapes and is suitable for palm grips. And here we have some interesting newcomers. Let me start with wave. I've been quite critical of palm style grips in the past. I think you sacrifice too much control by not using your fingertips. Although this wave piece almost makes me reconsider. Not quite, but almost. Your fingers feel well supported, and at least for me, I can use the end of my pinky to skate along the mousepad and adjust my friction as needed. The more I press down, the more stopping power I have. This is something I always do with my fingertips, but usually palm grip requires you to squeeze against the mouse so you don't have as much freedom to use your fingertips in such a way. By having these platforms to sit your fingers on, it frees up much of that usual squeezing, and you can use the length of your fingers to better control the mouse when compared to a typical palm grip. The extra claw has these two protrusions to grip into, and this is so interesting to me because I went and designed the clawmates because this sort of thing did not exist. A quick rundown on what's being achieved here is that for claw grips in particular, you want to grip into the mouse and down toward the palm. On typical mice, your fingertips feel like they're sliding against the mouse or simply can't manipulate the mouse how you want them to because the contact points you need aren't there. Having these surfaces to grip into makes your grip feel far more secure and ultimately more controlled. The problem is, if these surfaces are even slightly in the wrong position, it can feel pretty bad. I imagine this is why we haven't really seen this on stock mice. It would only work for a tiny portion of users and be uncomfortable or outright ruin the mouse for everyone else. By changing the thickness of the sides and hump, you can essentially shift the position of these surfaces around to better suit you. Although their distance apart, steepness and angle are all still fixed. The reason I still use my clawmates on the claw side rather than this extra claw piece is that I prefer a vertical face and less surface area with this short face forward, so my fingertip overhangs and has more freedom to manipulate the mouse. While I still prefer the customization and flexibility of using the clawmates, I think a lot of people will really enjoy using this. And finally, we have the slash. It works similarly to the extra claw, but with some important differences. The placements are much further up and they stick out much wider. On my normal length setup with the wide spacer, this does not feel great. But if I remove it or use the small spacer and using either the high hump or right hand hump, the mouse suddenly feels like I'm holding a ball, which is really comfortable and has a uniquely natural feel. I haven't been able to give this a good test yet to see how it performs while aiming because the shorter size tends to have me lifting the mouse up, which cuts out the sensor. They're working on a lift-off distance setting at the moment, and when that's up and running, I'll give this setup some more attention. Alrighty, so now that we've covered the modularity, let's take a look at the rest. And a quick reminder that this is a 3D printed pre-production model. The clicks are crisp and with only a little pre-travel. The shape of mouse 1 and 2 isn't my favorite. The tall and curved sides can make ridge clicking with the middle finger more difficult to do, and without a divider between mouse 1 and mouse 2, you can't ridge click with your index finger either. The idea behind ridge clicking is to be able to grip into the mouse with both your index and middle finger without actuating a click, so all 5 fingers are contributing to your grip, and you can still click when you want to. Only the G303 Shroud Edition has been perfect for this technique so far for me, and it's fairly niche, so I don't think many mouse designers have taken it into account. And it's honestly most likely a happy accident with the design of the G303 anyway. The Pathfinder comes with no mouse feet attached, and in the box you have X-ray pad jade and obsidian skates that you can choose from. Generally speaking, the white jades are fast and the red obsidian skates are slower. I personally find the jades to be too fast, so I've been using the obsidians, and rest assured they have outlined where the skates go, so applying them correctly is easy to do. While I have still been trying out many modern mice, nothing has been able to dethrone the G303 Shroud Edition for me until now. With the Pathfinder, I can mimic what I like from the G303 and leave out what I don't want. For example, I love these inward tapers on the right side and can mimic that with the right side claw piece. While I like the inward taper on the left side, the vertical taper is too dramatic. But on the Pathfinder, I can apply only the attributes I want with the pinch piece. I also find the mouse sensor to be placed too low, whereas it sits in a more standard position on the Pathfinder. It would be cool to have some way to adjust the sensor position too, so perhaps that's something they'll be able to figure out in the future. While I don't think the Pathfinder is 100% perfect for me yet, it is the closest I've ever gotten to my end game. And with the modular design, this is only one version of it. There will inevitably be more pieces made available in the future, or to print myself to further optimize it. Beyond the modularity of this mouse, what I think is most unique about this project is how collaborative it has been. As YouTubers, reviewers, streamers, whatever, you often get asked to review a product or offer feedback on it. Rarely are you ever involved in the design process. But with Orbital, they've been working with some of the best and most knowledgeable aimers on the planet, peripheral reviewers, and competitive FPS players every step of the way. It should now be available for pre-order on their website. I'll put some links below. And if you were thinking about picking one up, you can use code STRUTH for 2% off at checkout. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this project and what you think your ideal setup would be in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.